Hey everybody, Adam here. Today we are at our office location with Rocky Mountain Roofing and Restoration. So unfortunately I don't have an example of what we're going to be talking about, which is ice and water shield. A little bit of an impromptu video, apologies again. But I'm going to tell you just about everything about it. First segment is going to be for homeowners and newbies to the roofing industry. And then towards the end, we'll get towards how to install it, so maybe homeowners don't need to know that part. All right, so first of all, ice and water shield is what it's called. A lot of times it's just referred to as ice and water, or you'll see an abbreviation IWS if you see it written down somewhere. Basically, it's a membrane that goes on your roof to keep out ice and water from the edges along where your gutters are. Now, we're going to start off with who needs it. Well, you don't need it if you've got a flat roof. If you've got some kind of membrane on your roof that's rolled out to protect your roof and it's in, rows that are like 3, 5, or 10 feet, depending on what type of material it is, you don't need ice and water shield. You basically got something like that already. So if you've got shingles on your roof or tiles of any kind, you might need it depending on where you live. So basically, if your elevation is over 7,000 feet, you're going to need ice and water shield. In colder places where we're talking about you have to worry about freeze-thaw cycles or a lot of snow, you're going to need ice and water shield there. So we're in the Denver area here. Most jurisdictions around here require it, but not all of them. South of here, you're mostly not going to need it. Out towards the coast, you're not going to need it. North of here, though, they've actually got some more stringent requirements for it, and I'll mention those as we go along. But so if you get a lot of snow, it's likely that you're going to need ice and water shield. All right, so next thing is, so we talked about who and where needs it. That kind of went over why you need it, but let me get into depth about why you need it, especially in those freeze-thaw cycles. All right, so hopefully there's a bit of a glare on my camera. Hopefully it's not too much of a glare for you guys. But basically, this is a roof here, okay? So I've got a roof, a soffit, and an exterior wall of a house, and then I've got a gutter drawn in right there. Let me see if I turn off the light, is it still light enough for you to see without a glare? I think so. Got the curtains open on the sliding door over there. So, all right, so here's what happens, okay? I'm right-handed, so I don't think I can sit down. I'm gonna have to turn my back to you guys. Hopefully you can still hear me. All right, so let's say you get some snow. Oh, that might not be a dark enough line. We'll use the purple here. Alrighty, so you get some snow on your roof. Just in case this isn't dark enough, let me draw this again. This is the actual roof here. All right, hopefully y'all can see that. All right, so you guys seen those signs on the side of the road? Bridge freezes before the road, before, the other parts of the road. The reason why is that the ground is a good insulator. So the air that goes over, around, and under the bridge is not a good insulator. So the road with air underneath it and all around it gets cold really quickly. Same concept here, okay? So this area is the inside of your house, and you keep the heater on when it's winter. This area here is outside. No heater there. Cold air, not a good insulator. Then you've got a layer of insulation here, but doesn't go all the way out to the edge, and it's going to be thinner out here anyways and more over there, okay? Just because nobody lays it in perfectly level. All right, so what that equates to is this. This snow up here is going to melt first, and then it's going to run down this way, and at night, or if it's a really cold day out, it'll refreeze. And then eventually, well, let's say it runs into the gutter, and then this freezes, all right? So you've got ice right there. So then more snow comes down, and it doesn't go all the way into the gutter, it just goes to right here. So you start to get all of this frozen. And then more snow runs down, and it stops here. And all of this gets frozen. And then more snow runs down, and it might stop here. And all of this gets frozen. And eventually, this builds up so that when more snow melts and runs down, it gets built up behind this right here like it's a dam. So that's why we call it an ice dam, okay? You get an ice dam down here because snow melts up here, runs down here, freezes again. So thaw, runs down, freezes, thaw, runs down, freezes, and that builds up until you get some water back behind it, okay? At which point, this snow has probably melted, so that what happens is, come over here to a bit of a closer view, and water gets up underneath those shingles, because the shingles are they're nailed down, and then there are spots of sealant that keep the shingles together. But as you look at a shingle, it's got a long edge, and the sealant is in spots. So there's a spot here, 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 but in between, water can get up underneath there. So once water gets up underneath the shingles, you need some kind of waterproof layer to make sure that water doesn't get to the wood of your house. So that's what ice and water is, okay? It's a 3-foot wide membrane that you roll out along the edge of your roof. It adheres, it's got a peel and stick back into it, and then it adheres to the roof in that entire 3 feet for the entire length that you roll out, so that water is not going to get up underneath there. Even as you nail shingles onto it, it actually seals itself around the nail with the sticky substance that sealant that keeps it stuck to the roof. So water doesn't get through there, which is why we install it in places that have the possibility of ice damming. All right, so so that's kind of quick about who needs it, why they need it, a little bit of what it is, and when we use it. So let me just show you a little bit more on this diagram here. And now we're starting to get into information for people that install it, okay? And a little bit more detail for homeowners if they really want to know. All right, so I've got drawn here in orange an exterior wall, and in brown I've got the soffit and the fascia, and then this brown here is the OSB OSB decking that we install the roof on, okay? And in purple, I've got a drawing of the gutter, and this black line right here is what's called drip edge flashing, and this green line here is the ice and water shield. This purple line here is the starter shingle, and then these brown lines here are the actual shingles themselves, okay? So that's the order that we install it in. And while these joints here are nailed together, and they should be touching, there's no sealant in there at all. There's no caulking, no bead of any kind of sealant to keep air in and moisture out. There might be right here paint, and there might be right here paint. But right here, absolutely nothing. And the gutter is just screwed or nailed into the fascia. The drip edge is just nailed down onto the OSB decking. So from this joint up to the ice and water shield, there's no sealant, all right? So the ice and water shield is sealed down onto the decking and onto this top part of the drip edge here. And then, as I explained a little bit earlier, the starter and the shingles are sealed down to each other, but only about every 2 inches or so there's a blob of sealant that's it's manufactured on there as part of the manufacturing process. So when you get these ice dams, or even just if a downspout is clogged and the gutter fills up with water from rain, what happens is, I don't know if you can see very well, but the front edge of the gutter is actually higher than the back edge of the gutter. So if this fills up with water, then it's going to run over the back side of it before it runs over the front side, okay? Again, there's no sealant between the drip edge and the gutter, so water can definitely go up in between there and then get back into the roof. Also, there's no sealant between the fascia and the decking, so water, when it gets back into the roof, can easily get through there and then be in your attic, get your soffit wet. So if you see bad soffits, waterlogged soffits, stains on there, most likely it's because of ice damming or a clogged downspout and the gutter filled up and water went back into the roof that way. And as I promised earlier, areas more north of here, for example, I know that in Minnesota, they actually require that the green line here, the ice and water shield, is put down before the drip edge, and it actually comes down onto the fascia so that it's more like this, if you can see that very well. And then the drip edge is put on, and then another strip of ice and water shield is put on top of the drip edge so that this joint right here actually is sealed by the ice and water. Because it's just so common up there. So that's not a requirement, even when ice and water shield is required in the Denver area. I'm not super familiar up in the mountains. Some of those jurisdictions might require the same method of installation for ice and water shield. Some commercial entities, like a lot government installations, might require it like that around here as well. But it's a lot more labor involved, so it's not a common practice around here. But that's one way. If you've got a leak in the soffit area here, most likely it's come up from the gutter. It's not actually coming from something in the roof. All right, so that's the close-up diagram of there. Now the question is, how much ice and water shield do you need, right? So code requires that 24 inches inside of the exterior wall. And then you draw a line up, and the ice and water shield has to come all the way up to that line there, okay? Or, shown a different way, we take these down. Put that over there. Put that one right over there. And I've got some diagrams and triangles drawn for you guys. All right, so 24 inches from the exterior wall is how far in we have to go. And then you've got the drywall, which is a 1/2 inch. You've got a 2x4 here, which is actually 3.5 inches. And this is the cheapest, thinnest way to construct an exterior wall. Like, this is, in my opinion, almost criminal to put a 2x4 on the exterior wall. It should at least be a 2x6. And then you've got a sheet of OSB that is attached to the 2x4. And then outside of that, you've got some kind of siding with a trim piece at the top of the siding. And then resting on that trim piece, you've got a soffit that extends out. And then attached to the end of that soffit, you've got a piece of fascia that sticks up like that, okay? So the drywall is a 1/2 inch, the 2x4 is 3.5, the OSB sheeting is also a 1/2 inch. This trim here is about 1 inch, typically. And then when you use your tape measure, you put your tape measure up against that trim, the front edge of that trim, and you measure out to the leading edge of the fascia. Because if you remember that diagram that I just showed, the decking comes all the way down to the leading edge of the fascia, and so does the ice and water shield. So that fascia is about 1/2 inch as well, okay? So what we need to figure out is how far up the roof do we need to put the ice and water shield? So what we really need to know is how far we need to go horizontally. And that's what we're figuring out here, okay? So what can be variable is the length or the width, or actually depth, of the soffit. So the depth of the soffit can be variable. These are minimums, okay? So take our minimums over here, add the 24 inches, the 1/2 inch, the 3.5 inches, the other 1/2 inch, this inch of trim here, and this 1/2 inch of fascia here, and you get 30 inches plus the depth of the soffit, not including the fascia. Because even if, let's say, there's 0 soffit, there's still going to be some fascia that goes up to the roof. All right, so now how far up the roof you go depends on the pitch of the roof, or the slope of the roof, okay? So again, I told you guys, if you've got a flat roof, you don't need ice and water shield. You've actually got something better already at keeping ice and water out. So 212 is the lowest pitch that we can use. And let me come over here so I'm not off the screen. I don't care if I have my back to you. 212 is the lowest pitch that we can install shingles on, okay? And because of the angle, one line of ice and water, or one roll of ice and water, is 36 inches wide. And at a 212 pitch, that you're going to get a horizontal depth of about 35.5 inches, okay? So if we're already taking up 30 inches between all of the non-variable things there, then that means we can only get 5.5 inch soffit. Anything over a 5.5 inch soffit with the cheapest exterior wall possible, and you have to go more than one line of ice and water up the roof. I've seen no soffits, and then it jumps all the way out basically to like 11-inch soffit. Not very common to have anything in between. In the Denver area, for a no soffit roof, it's going to be pretty old construction anyways. 1 foot soffit is the most common. 18 inches and 24 inches is also pretty common. So on the lowest slope possible, cheapest construction possible, you can only have a 5.5-inch soffit before you have to do a second line of ice and water shield. All right. If it's a 412, which is not very steep, kind of common roof, your 36 inches of ice and water is going to cover about 34 horizontal inches. So if your soffit is more than 4 inches wide, you need 2 lines of ice and water. On a 612, which is for roofers, still not considered steep. Any soffit more than 2 inches is going to need 2 lines of ice and water. For an 812 pitch, which is still considered walkable, but it is considered steep for a roofer, you know, we're going to charge a little bit extra labor for that. Absolutely zero. There's no soffit. You still should put 2 lines of ice and water on there because this is the cheapest and nearly criminal width of exterior wall here. If you've got brick or stone facade, then you're already at negative here, and you're definitely gonna have to put 2 lines of ice and water on there. If you've got anything more than basically a shack of a house, then you're gonna have a 2x6 here, which is gonna add another 2 inches to all of this, so that at your 612, you're gonna have 0 allowance of soffit before you need 2 lines of ice and water. So if you've got brick or stone facade on a decently constructed house and you've got a 612, you're already negative and you already need 2 lines of ice and water shield. So again, either the soffit is none, or you pretty much need 2 lines of ice and water shield, because there's hardly ever anything between 0 and 12 inches of soffit depth. So why are you only putting 1 line on there?